I read about women for a whole month, and somehow every single one turned into a book about rage, repression, or psychological breakdown. We had serial killers, mothers turning into dogs, women literally starving themselves out of existence, generational hauntings. This month was not light. What made this reading month so interesting is that all of these books are saying something very real about womanhood. They're just saying it differently. So let's talk about everything I read in Women's History Month, because I have thoughts. Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Princess, and this is where we judge books, not people. There's enough judgment going around. Let's keep the judgment on the page. In today's video, I am doing my March wrap up. This reading month's theme was very intentional. It was centered around Women's History Month. I really wanted to spend March reading stories about women from women's perspective, books that explore femininity, motherhood, rage, repression, identity, family, the patriarchy, and the psychological weight of being seen, used, and misunderstood. I still enjoy reading a diverse group of books, and so even though I am reading books that are just women authors, there are different ethnicity groups, there's different literary genres. I have horror, I have lit fic, I have speculative, I have a book of poetry. So it's still a very diverse group of books that I read in the month of March. So let's just get into all of the books I read this March. First book, we have My Sister, the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. This book follows Korede, who is a practical, responsible nurse who is used to cleaning up after her younger sister, Ayola, and that's quite literally. Ayola is in the habit of killing her boyfriends, allegedly in self-defense. We don't know, we weren't there. And every time it happens, Korede is the one who gets the call. She comes with the bleach, the cleaning gloves, she helps remove the body, and she helps clean up the crime scene like a big sister should. That premise sounds wild, and it is, but it's not just about murder. It's really about the relationship between these two sisters. Korede has spent most of her life living in her younger sister's Ayola's shadow. Ayola is effortlessly charming, she's adored, and she's always forgiven easily. She's beautiful. Korede is competent, invisible, emotionally burdened, and consistently cleaning up the damage other people create. The dynamic built between them is built on history, loyalty, resentment, and the kind of love that's slowly rotting away, especially from Korede's perspective. Things get more complicated when Ayola sets her sights on the doctor Korede is secretly madly in love with, and Korede is forced to reckon with the fact that the person she spent so much time protecting may eventually destroy the one thing she wants for herself. What I really liked about this book is how sharply it captures the exhaustion of being the good woman. Korede is the dependable woman, the self-controlled one, the one who suppresses her own needs and desires and makes just to make herself useful for other people. Meanwhile, Ayola gets to be messy, she gets to be dangerous, she gets to be selfish, and still adored because she's beautiful enough to be perceived as soft. This contrast gives the novel a little bit more bite, and I think really relevant, especially in my community, Black women community, who gets to be protected, who gets to be soft, and that narrative is really seen and explored throughout this book. Ayola gets to benefit from how people perceived femininity, softness, the fragility, the perceived innocence. The novel understands that beauty can act as a kind of social protection, while women like Korede, less dazzling, more serious, more competent, are often overlooked until someone needs something from them. There's a bitterness there that felt very intentional for this main character. I also liked how compact and controlled the writing was for this book. Chapters are short and the humor is incredibly dry. That makes the violence hit harder because the story never over-explains itself emotionally. What stood out to me the most is that even though this story is about a serial killer, it's really about sisterhood and obligation and the cost of what it means to be loyal to someone who just takes and takes and takes from you. It asks, what do we owe family, or what do we owe, people in our life, not just family, but friends and long-term relationships, however they may be. What do we owe this person in our life that is just constantly taking and using? And at what point does love become complicity in someone's behavior? Next, I read Nightbitch by Rachel Yoder. This book follows an unnamed mother who has left behind her own art career to be a full-time stay-at-home mom for her young son while her husband travels for work. She is isolated, she's exhausted, overstimulated, unseen, and slowly hollowed out by the monotony and physicality of early motherhood. Her life becomes an endless cycle of caretaking, domestic labor, interrupted sleep, and the erasure of herself. And then things start to get a little weird. She begins to believe she's transforming into a dog. She notices hair growing in strange places, a new set of instincts taking over, bizarre bodily changes, a violent animalistic energy rising up that she can no longer suppress. The book is constantly living in this space of, is this literally happening, or is this a psychological symbolic breakdown? There's never really any a clear-cut answer to that, but either way, the transformation is real in the emotional sense. She's becoming something else because the version of womanhood and motherhood being imposed on her is unsustainable. Along the way, this novel explores her resentment towards her husband, who gets to be a part of the family, but he still gets to be himself. It explores the alienation from the sanitized perfect mom culture and her trying to reclaim this hungry, alive version of herself. This book really worked for me as a story about maternal rage and identity annihilation. The central idea is outrageous, obviously, but it taps into something very real. The way that motherhood can be romanticized while the actual mother disappears inside it. The narrator is expected to be endlessly giving, patient, fulfilled by the act of sacrifice. It should be, her honor to sacrifice her life, her happiness, her identity for, motherhood. And this book absolutely rejects that fantasy. What I can appreciate about Nightbitch is that it refuses to make female anger pretty. This is not a polished meditation on womanhood. It's ugly, it's bodily, it's strange, and at times it's excessive. And I think that's kind of the point. The narrator has been forced to contain herself for so long that when her rage and instincts finally bubble up to the surface, it doesn't show itself as socially acceptable. I also think this book is doing something interesting with the animal transformation metaphor. She becomes more feral as she becomes more honest with herself. She becomes more physical, instinctive, less interested in performing more civilly. The book won't work for everyone because the book can be a bit repetitive on purpose. It leans hard into the absurdity, but for me, the repetitive mirrored the numbing cycle of domestic life, and the absurdity kind of gave it its teeth. As I was reading, this book reminded me a lot of Such Sharp Teeth, and I gave that one of my better reads for 2025. I absolutely love that book. I love the turning into a wolf metaphor. The book went a lot deeper into the main character's childhood and having to reclaim who she is as a woman and her voice, and how not just unsettling and grotesque that can be, the transformation can be, but sometimes you kind of need to be a bitch to get shit done. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what these two books have in common, is that metaphor. Both women are becoming dog-like to heal and to grow and to be who they really want to be in life, right? And sometimes you do have to just be a bitch. From there, I kept the motherhood horror thing going, and I picked up Motherthing by Annalise Hogarth. This one follows Abby, whose mother-in-law recently died by a way of unaliving herself. Abby lives with her husband Ralph, who is devastated by the loss and deeply shaped by his abusive and manipulative mother. But even after the mother-in-law is gone, her presence doesn't really leave the house. Abby begins to feel haunted, not just by the possibility of the literal ghost, but by the ongoing psychological damage that this woman inflicted on her family. As Ralph starts to deteriorate under the weight of grief, depression, old childhood trauma, Abby becomes more desperate to save him. But the deeper she gets into desperation, the more unstable her own reality becomes. Her thoughts starts to spiral, her action becomes more questionable and disturbing, and what starts as a story about wanting to protect your loved one quickly turns into something more grotesque. No spoilers. Abby is such an interesting character to me because she occupies that familiar role of the woman who tries to hold everything together. She wants to fix, she wants to soothe, she wants to absorb all of the pain, she wants to rescue. But this book twists that role into something horrifying. It asks what happens when caregiving becomes martyrdom and when martyrdom becomes madness. Her love for her husband is real, it's there, but it becomes entangled with control, delusion, and also self-destruction. I also thought the tone was incredibly effective. This book is dark, but it's also strangely funny in this jagged, uncomfortable way. I really like the two characters, Abby and Ralph, the husband and wife. Their dry sense of humor, I really enjoyed that. The mix of humor and horror creates this feeling of emotional instability, and I think that suits this book really well. This one felt especially strong as a Women's History Month read because it's so invested in the suffocating expectation placed on women within the family system. Women are often cast as healers, emotional managers, and absorbers of generational pain. Even though this is Abby's mother-in-law, she kind of took on the job of fixing her husband, who was raised and has all of this childhood trauma, and she took on the burden of, I can fix this, I can heal this, let me absorb all of your childhood trauma. But this book says that role can destroy you too, if you let it. And it did. Next, I read The Vegetarian by Han Kang, or Han Kang. This book centers on Yeong Hee, a seemingly ordinary woman from South Korea whose whole life changes when she starts having vivid, violent, blood-soaked dreams. In response, she suddenly decides to stop eating meat. Like, I'm done. No more blood-soaked dreams for me. On the surface, the decision sounds simple, but within the world of the novel, it becomes an act of radical refusal. One that completely disrupts her marriage, her family, and the expectation placed on women in this society. This novel is told in 3 parts. Interestingly, Ying Hong, I think I'm saying that name right, I don't know. Yeong Hee is not really allowed to tell her story. Instead, we mostly get perspectives from the people around her controlling husband, her brother-in-law, and her sister. That structure becomes increasingly important because it shows how thoroughly she is objectified, interpreted, and acted upon by others. As Yi Young-hee withdraws from social norms, food, sex, marriage, even her own body, the people around her respond with disgust, obsession, even violence and confusion. What begins as, not the sun coming out, what begins as vegetarianism evolves into a more profound rejection of being consumed by everyone else around her. This one was the most interesting read of the month for me. The vegetarian is doing so much with bodily autonomy, patriarchal violence, and the consequences of female refusal. Young-hee's decision to not eat meat is treated as a threat, right? Because it represents disobedience. She's no longer behaving docile, compliant, useful to others in a way that they expect her to be useful. And that response to that non-compliance is chilling. How they treat her, even physically treat her, is chilling. One of the most powerful things about this novel is the way that it withholds the main character, kind of the main character, Young-hee, from us. We don't get easy access to her because of the people around her don't really see her as being a full person. They see her as the wife, the body, an inconvenience, an embarrassment, a burden. That narrative choice reinforces the novel's larger point about erasure of self and the dehumanization of this woman. For Women's History Month, this felt like such an important read because it captures the truth that shows up again and again in women's stories. When women say no, when they refuse, withdraw, stop performing, stop feeding others, stop giving access to their bodies, that refusal often is treated as monstrous, right? Like there's something wrong with her. Right? Like she's broken. She needs to go back to the factory and get reprogrammed because she's no longer being docile or pretty or small. She won't allow me to mistreat her anymore. She's broken. And what the main character resolved was that I'm going to completely take control of my body and yeah, this book was interesting. Book was interesting. Next, I read Milk and Honey by Ruby Carr. This is a 4-part, I believe it's 4 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4. It is the hurting, the loving, the breaking, and the healing. Those are the 4 parts. Through short, minimalist poems, Carr explores experiences connected to womanhood, things like love, heartbreak, sexual trauma, immigration, body image issues, and self-worth. Though these poems are extremely stripped down, they are emotionally accessible, and they often feel like fragments of thoughts or confessions rather than like a fully structured narrative. I think what makes Milk and Honey so interesting is that, especially within this reading month, is how different its approach is compared to all of the other books that I mentioned, where a lot of the other books that I read this month externalize women's pain through horror, transformation, or circumstances. Milk and Honey internalizes. It's quieter, it's more intimate, it's less about plot and more about emotional recognition. And lastly, I read Harpy by Megan Hunter. This is it's a short book. It's a strange book, an unsettling novel about a woman whose husband cheats on her. And after his betrayal becomes public knowledge, the couple makes an arrangement where she's allowed to get her lick back, her revenge, 3 times. And he signs off on this. He's like, sure, okay. And from there, the novel follows the wife as she moves through rage, humiliation, revenge, and transformation. This book felt like a very fitting final book for Women's History Month because it gathers all of the themes I saw across all of the other books: female anger, bodily transformation, marital confinement, motherhood, and the fear of what happens when women stop absorbing pain quietly. What I found most interesting is that Harpy treats revenge less like a plot mechanism and more like a psychological, symbolic process, right? The question isn't just whether her acts of retaliation is justified. The question is what betrayal does to women's sense of self and whether there is a clean way to contain the rage that follows. This is a short book. It came off a bit cold to me, sharp, quietly vicious in a way that I think will work for some readers, not all readers. If you're really into lit fic, I think this could be more for you as it feels more symbolic than anything else. I did read quite a few books, but I had a whole roster of books that I had my pick from, and here are a few of them that I did not get to that I really wanted to. And because I had such a good time in this subgenre of femme rage, I think I'm just going to continue this throughout the year because I enjoyed it so much, because I enjoyed women's stories so much, and I really like femme rage. Apparently I enjoyed this subgenre and I want to dabble some more, so I will be reading these other books. I'm currently in the middle of The Power by Naomi Alderman. I really wanted to finish it by the end of Women's History Month. I thought it was gonna make the cut. It did not. I'm not done. I'm like 60-70% done with it, and I like it so far, but I'm not done with it, and so that's where I am with that book. Yeah, let me know if you've read any of the books that I've read in the month of March, and if you've read any of these other books that I will absolutely be reading this year for sure. And are you a fan of femme rage? Because I didn't know I was a fan, and now I'm obsessed. I'm literally obsessed with femme rage. Okay, in my monthly recaps, I do like to end my recaps with the category is, to just kind of give more clarification and just break down, not even really for you, but for me, and to like go over what I enjoyed and what I read in the category. So in the category of most unsettling, I would probably say that would go to Motherthing. It's more psychologically suffocating side of things and grotesque in some ways. And I had a good time with that one. Yeah, most unsettling book I read in Women's History Month is Motherthing. The most fun book to talk about is Nightbitch. It's weird, it's bold, it's a bit absurd. It gives you a lot to unpack with motherhood, identity, performance, and rage. The sharpest social commentary for sure, hands down, is My Sister, the Serial Killer. That book is more controlled and like precise, and says so much about gender, beauty, labor, family with such a slim page count. It's not a big book at all, but the precision really stood out to me. It said a lot in so few pages. The one that was more emotionally heavy for me, and I know that's gonna sound like kind of crazy, is Milk and Honey. This was really good for me. This was such a good read. They're really short, clear poems, but the precision of the emotional depth is crazy. Yeah, that was probably my most emotional heavy read for this month. And the most femme rage book that I read this month is gonna be Nightbitch. This is really like in your face, I'm a bitch and I have something to say about all of these social things that happened to me in my marriage and my friend group. Nightbitch is loud and in your face and obviously feral. Nightbitch really tackles the question, what happens when women stop swallowing their anger and let it out and become socially unacceptable. The theme, again, for Women's History Month is what happens when women refuse, right? What happens when women refuse to perform? What happens when women refuse to nurture endlessly with no questions asked? What happens when women refuse to be consumed? What happens when women refuse to remain soft and agreeable, digestible versions of themselves? That's what made this reading month so interesting in Women's History Month, is because women's stories are often, especially in Women's History Month, women's stories are often flattened into inspirational resilience. And these books reminded me that women's stories are also about rage. Their stories are also about ugliness and contradiction and grief and despair, horror, and survival. If you read any of these books, definitely let me know in the comment section which books do you think best captures women's complexities in their inner lives. And also, if I have a list that you think like, oh, this book should definitely be on her Femme Rage TBR, you let me know. Let me know if I'm missing any, like, gotta read this Femme Rage, you have to get into this author. Let me know in the comment section. I am absolutely locked into this subgenre right now. And if you enjoyed this video, like it, that would be helpful. Comment, that would be helpful. Yeah, and if you want to come back, subscribe, That's it. Okay, that is my video. That's my whole video, you guys. Those are my thoughts on the month of March. Thanks so much for sticking around to the end of the video. All 2 of you. I know nobody watches. It's cool. It's good. It's good. Ain't nobody gotta watch. I'm gonna show up anyway. You're enough. Okay, thanks. Bye.